Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Layo Olarinde. The headlines. At least 17 people killed after Russian missile strikes on Odessa apartments and recreational center. Moscow's foreign minister says a new iron curtain descending between Russia and the West, warning to behave carefully. Plus, U.S. President Joe Biden pledges long-term support for Ukraine. Hello and welcome to the program once again. At least 17 people have been killed after Russian missiles struck a 9-story apartment building and a resort facility near Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa early this morning. Ukrainian authorities say at least 30 other people were wounded. Footage released by the State Emergency Services of Ukraine shows the aftermath of the missile strike as emergency services search through debris of the destroyed apartment building. The missile struck the building in the town of Bilhorod, causing a fire in an attached storage building. Sefri Brachuk, the spokesperson for the Odessa Regional Administration, told state television that a rescue operation is underway and some people remain buried under the rubble after a section of the building collapsed. The Kremlin in Russia says it has not yet decided whether President Vladimir Putin would attend November's G20 summit in Indonesia. In a call with reporters, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says Russia had an invitation to attend and would decide at the necessary time whether Putin would go in person. Western leaders are weighing how to approach the summit if President Putin attends, with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson calling on leaders not to boycott if the Russian president does decide to attend the summit. In the meantime, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, says that a new iron curtain is descending between Russia and the West. Moscow's decision to invade Ukraine in February has triggered an overhaul of Europe's defense and security policies, led to the historic Nordic expansion of NATO, with the Swedish and Finnish membership seeing the imposing of severe sanctions on Russian goods and services and hardened anti-Russian sentiment across the continent. While speaking at a press conference in Belarus, the Russian foreign minister, Mr. Lavrov, said that the process has begun for the closing of a new iron curtain between Russia and its Western neighbors. Mr. Lavrov adds that Moscow has not had any relations with the EU since 2014, when Moscow annexed the peninsula of Crimea from Ukraine. The NATO summit has concluded, with many Western leaders pledging more and more support for Ukraine. Leading that group is the U.S., that says it will continue the ongoing support for the country. President Joe Biden says this will include $800 million of additional weapons aid for Ukraine, and that is to be announced in the coming days. President Biden also says Russia's invasion of Ukraine has led to a stronger and more united alliance. He has also welcomed the additions of Sweden and Finland to NATO and said the alliance would defend every inch of NATO territory.
To Russia's aggression and to help Ukraine defend itself. The United States, before the war started, I told Putin that if he invaded Ukraine, NATO would not only get stronger, but would get more united. And he would see democracies in the world stand up and oppose his aggression and defend the rules-based order. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. This summit was about strengthening our alliance, meeting the challenges of our world as it is today, and the threats we're going to face in the future.
Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas has said Russia would not respond to Sweden and Finland by triggering a conventional war over their ascension to NATO. Kallas said Russian President Vladimir Putin is more likely to respond through hybrid warfare methods.
Of course, we have to expect some kind of surprises from Putin, but I doubt that he is attacking Sweden or Finland directly. We will see cyber attacks, definitely. We will see hybrid attacks. Information war is going on, but not the conventional war. I doubt it.
This is a style of this regime to try to scare us, to show us as a weak, as not decisive, but I think we have to prove, and we have historic opportunity to prove that this time everything will be different. And Europe, NATO will be strong, will take all necessary actions, and Putin this time will be put to the place where he should be.
Belarusian hospitals who contains Russian soldiers, and they receive the medical support in these hospitals. But I don't think that the Belarusian authorities and the Belarusian society will decide to enter to this war and to support Russia in their aggression against Ukraine.
Plans by Finland and Sweden to join the NATO alliance sends a clear signal to Russia that Russian leader Vladimir Putin's strategies are wrong and self-defeating. Well, that's according to French President Emmanuel Macron, who was speaking to the NATO summit in Spain on Thursday. NATO invited Sweden and Finland on Wednesday to join the military alliance in one of the biggest shifts in European security in decades, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine pushed Helsinki and Stockholm to drop their tradition of neutrality. Macron says France would soon deliver 6 further Caesar guns to help Ukraine in this fight. Earlier this week, US President Joe Biden pledged more American troops, warplanes and warships for Europe as NATO agreed the biggest strengthening of its deterrence since the Cold War in response to Russia. Well, for Sweden and Finland, they will on Tuesday, July 5th, sign the NATO Accession Protocol to formally join the alliance. Well, this is according to NATO Secretary General, Mr. Jens Stoltenberg, and this comment is coming just days after Turkey lifted its veto over the bid by both countries to join the alliance after the 3 nations agreed to protect each other's security. The Accession Protocol must, however, be ratified by all 30 allied parliaments to allow both countries to become part of NATO and benefit from the alliance's collective defense clause.
We have also taken note of the message. We'll do the formal signing of the accession protocol on Tuesday with the presence of the Swedish and Finnish foreign ministers. But the reality, the decision has been decided already with the political decision by all the leaders. We have also taken note of the messages from Moscow, actually, that it doesn't change so much that Finland and Sweden are joining the alliance. Well, they have communicated different messages from Moscow on that issue. The most important thing for us is that Finland and Sweden will become members of the alliance. We are there to protect all allies, and of course also Finland and Sweden, and we are prepared for all eventualities. In trying to facilitate some kind of agreement, also Greece announced that they are ready to make available ships to get grain out of Ukraine, and other allies are involved in different diplomatic efforts to get some kind of agreement to allow ships to sail with food, wheat over the Black Sea. Then Lithuania, other countries.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has fired back at leaders of the Group of 7 for mocking his macho image, saying the image of the Western leaders undressed would be a disgusting sight anyway, regardless if it was from top or from bottom. Speaking at a news conference during a visit to Turkmenistan on Wednesday, Putin hit back at world leaders and advised them to refrain from alcohol abuse and to do exercise. Well, the comments came after G7 leaders poked fun at their absent adversary at a meeting in Germany, where British Prime Minister Boris Johnson could be heard asking colleagues if they should keep their jackets on or off. As he says, we've got to show them we are tougher than Putin. or despite that noise in the room from members of the press and officials, Canadian Prime Minister and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen could be heard joking about a picture that showed the bare-chested horse-riding Putin, referring to the macho photo opportunities of the Russian leader. The Russian leader also rejected Boris Johnson's charge that if he were a woman, he would not have invaded Ukraine. Putin pointed to a former British leader, Margaret Thatcher's decision to send troops into the Falklands as a rebuttal of Johnson's theory. Indonesian President Joko Widodo has offered to serve as a communication bridge for the leaders of Ukraine and Russia in a bid to boost hopes for peace between the latter two nations. Mr. Widodo, who is the current G20 president, spoke at a news conference with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin after a meeting in Moscow, saying that Indonesia wants to see the end of the conflict, especially so that food supply, fertilizers and energy supply chains will be fixed soon enough. Mr. Widodo had met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday after attending the G7 summit in Germany. After their meeting, Widodo offered to deliver a message from Kyiv to Putin, but it's not immediately clear how Zelensky responded to that offer. Russia's war in Ukraine has exacerbated a global food crisis, sending prices soaring for grains, cooking oils, fuel and fertilizers. Well, joining us now for a usual discussion on the program is international affairs analyst Sonny Ekwosi, who joins us from Lagos here. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's begin with what you think about the humanitarian situation that looks like now, given the massive amount of shelling and fighting going on in eastern Ukraine and other areas.
Well, I think it is really unfortunate that we are seeing increased sharing in eastern Ukraine, and also with the threat of Finland and Sweden to join NATO has also increased the threat, in the sense that we are gradually seeing a new world order, in the sense that if Finland and Sweden joins NATO, it's going to be terrible, in the sense that first it's going to empower the European nation, in the sense that it will increase their presence in the Baltic Sea region. It will mitigate their vulnerability in that region. It will also strengthen their stronghold. And on the part of Putin, it's also going to be, it's going to expose Russia's vulnerability. They said, because you know that Putin has been promising that he has all it takes. He has all the military might to withstand what is the war in Ukraine. But now Putin is going to send more forces to the border, because right now, Finland, that shares a land border with Russia, I mean, Russia will now be forced to divide its military, sending some to Ukraine and the other one to the border, now to ensure that nothing happens. And I'm afraid, in the sense that some are saying that we are going to see a third world war coming, because you know that Putin has threatened that if Finland and Sweden join NATO, and if the land of Finland in particular serves as the NATO base, he is going to retaliate, in the sense that Russia is going to respond. So, and that response, we don't know how it's going to be. And if Russia responds, then we are thinking of, speculation is that we might be seeing a third world war. We pray that it does not happen. But that is largely where we are going now. It's a complete change in the whole geographical permutation. It's a complete change in the world order since the collapse of Soviet Union 22 years ago, and since the end of the Cold War. We're now seeing a new alignment, which is changing the face of the world. And so we pray that it might not gravitate to a third world war, because Putin is going to respond, and because if he sees that he's weak, He doesn't want to be seen to be weak. It's a thing of pride. So he wants to respond as soon as Finland and Sweden join NATO. We are seeing it's going to happen in the next few months. It's going to happen, and then there will be a change in that war. A change in the sense that Russia will be antagonized, and Putin will be tempted to respond, and then we are going to see a stronger European security forces in that Baltic region for the first time. You know, the European nations, the EU in particular, has been afraid that, well, nothing, because they didn't have a stronger force, in that Baltic region. But with Finland and Sweden joining, they feel confident that they'll have a stronger force to respond to any Russian attack.
Well, this Western alliance is giving Ukraine a lot of military aid. We've heard from the US, we've heard from the UK, even France, sending in more weapons to aid Ukraine's fight. But less noticed and perhaps less amounts are going to humanitarian support. How should Western countries, go about that?
This is very important because in my last intervention on this program, I said that humanitarianism is a path that we must not depart from. In this war, the most important thing is the humanitarian aspect. More people are being killed. Ukraine is completely destroyed, and the world is not getting any better. All of us are affected, including Nigerians. So we are saying that, the humanitarian effort should increase. Some are saying that the roundtable talk, peaceful talk, has not yielded any dividend. I would suggest that roundtable talk should continue, and there should be more humanitarian responses from many nations, because war serves no purpose. We are seeing what is happening now, that Russia thought was going to be a simple, how do they call it, a simple military attack or whatever. Thought that it was going to last 2 or 3 days. But now we are seeing the war, advancing and going to months, and if we're not possible, it's going to go to years, and if we're not careful, it'll lead to a third world war. So that humanitarian responses should continue for many nations, because Ukraine needs a lot of those responses and those humanitarian help efforts, from the many humanitarian organizations should assist in many ways. I know very well that many displaced Ukrainians are now in Poland. Poland should also help, to ensure that these refugees are quite assisted in one way or the other. And also, the buildings that have been destroyed will have to be, we have to be repaired after the war. We're talking about now how to ensure that Ukrainians who are displaced are catered for, humanitarian, to ensure that more lives are not lost.
Well, Russia calls it a special military operation, and peace moves or talks have seemed to take in a back seat. Yet, massive amounts of grain and food supplies are stuck in Ukraine, and even Russia, which is affecting the world, and like you pointed, it's affecting Nigerians. Well, is there any incentive for progress, on this front?
The progress is, as I said, that we just have to continue to call for meetings, to call for discussions. The Pope Francis has said so many things about the war, that they should not allow the war to escalate more or probably lead to a third world war. I would suggest that more responses should to continue by many nations and many organizations to assist in this peaceful talk. But the danger is there, look, that within our pride, I have to repeat again, this hubris, that right now, the talk of Finland and Sweden joining NATO has emboldened President Putin, and he's sure to go all out to ensure that he reasserts, his strength, to reassure his nation that he has the strength, because he promised them that militarily he was up to the task. We wouldn't want to be seen as a coward or as backing out of the war. And so my fear is that he's not going to even agree to any peaceful talk now, rather that there's a threat of, Finland and Sweden are trying to join NATO. I think that joining has made a lot of difference now, because we are now going to a new world order, and we are now going to see a strengthened European force against a Russian force. And if we are not careful, China might even join Russia in the whole process, and even more countries will be on the side of Russia. And then we have balance. Everything will balance for a complete Third World War, if you like.
All right, then, Mr. Sonny Kosi, International Affairs Analyst and from the Human and Constitutional Rights Committee, African Bar Association. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the program.
Very grateful. Thanks a lot.
Still ahead on this program. It's more help for Ukraine as the country receives 446.8 million euro loan from the World Bank. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Residents of Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, are welcoming the news of Russian forces abandoning the strategic Black Sea outpost of Snake Island, and it's a major victory for Ukraine that could loosen the grip of Russia's blockade on Ukrainian ports. Russia's defense ministry said it had decided to withdraw from the outcrop as a gesture of goodwill to show Moscow was not obstructing UN efforts to open a humanitarian corridor allowing grains to be shipped from Ukraine. Ukraine said it had driven the Russian forces out after a massive artillery and assault overnight. Snake Island has held the world's attention since Russia seized it on the war's first day, when a Ukrainian guard ordered by Russia's flagship cruiser Moscow to surrender radioed back that the warship should go away. Ukraine's postal service in April issued 1 million stamps brandishing the defiant insults to Russia, and the image of the Ukrainian Snake Island Guard features on T-shirts, calendars, and fridge magnets that were sold as souvenirs across Ukraine. Well, Ukraine's President Zelensky says that Snake Island is free, but he says there's no guarantee that the enemy will not come back to the strategic Black Sea outpost. The control of Snake Island or Zimny Island could loosen the grip of Russia's blockade on Ukrainian ports. Or the island was captured. It captured the world's attention after Russia seized it on the first day. Zelensky describes the situation in the Donbas as the harshest. Now, Russia has focused its firepower on capturing cities and towns in that Donbas region, which comprises of Donetsk and Luhansk provinces on the border with Russia. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been speaking on NATO's unity amidst the ongoing Russian invasion. He said the invasion is bringing NATO to Russia's doorstep, adding that President Putin's actions had made the alliance stronger and united the West. On allegations about NATO being a threat to Russia, Mr. Johnson says it never was remotely likely that Ukraine would join NATO in the foreseeable future before the war. Mr. Johnson then says it is up to the people of Ukraine to decide if and when they want to strike a deal with Russia to get peace. But he says he has seen that in a poll after the attack on the shopping mall in Kremenchuk, 89% of Ukrainians would, under no circumstances, contemplate a land for peace deal. Well, Russian president, on the other hand, says Russia would respond in kind if NATO destroys troops and infrastructure in Finland, deploys troops and infrastructure in Finland and in Sweden after they join the alliance. Speaking after a meeting with regional leaders in the ex-Soviet state of Turkmenistan, President Putin says, with Sweden and Finland, we don't have the problems that we have with Ukraine. They want to join NATO, go ahead. But they must understand that there is no threat before, while now, if military contingencies and infrastructures are deployed there who will have to respond in kind and create the same threats for the territories from which threats towards us are created. Well, he said this is inevitable that Moscow's relations with Helsinki and Stockholm would sour over their NATO membership. Well, China, which had received some lashing from NATO Secretary General, says the alliance's first new strategy concept in a decade, which cites China as a concern for the first time, disregards facts and wrongly defines the country's intentions. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian says it speaks ill of China's normal military development and national defense policy. NATO, in its new strategic concept unveiled for the first time, described China as a challenge to NATO's interests, security, and values, as an economic and military power that remains opaque about its strategy, intentions, and military build-up. Well, Chinese state media had also warned against South Korea and Japan attending the NATO summit and criticized the alliance's broadening partnerships in Asia. Well, let's have another discussion, this time on the security aspect of this war. We have joining us now security analyst Temitope Olodo. He joins us from London. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, has Russia not, with benefit of hindsight, made a strategic error by its attack on Ukraine, since NATO is now closer to it on more fronts with the admission of Sweden and Finland?
I think Russia actually made a strategic error when they annexed Crimea in February 28th, 2014. That was the first error they made, because that then opened up, a lot of countries that have never thought of, getting themselves armed up against Russia, to start getting a bit worried. And I think the decision of Russia to annex or to try and attack Ukraine was a miscalculation, because it has made NATO to shift its strategic position from looking at Russia as being a strategic partner to looking at them as being, an affront, more or less. And as we could see from your news report, we now see them, coming very close to Russia than they've ever come before, because that was not part of the plan before. 3-4 years ago, if we've asked this question, many would have said that this would never have happened. But from the look of things, Russia has miscalculated. They've miscalculated the spirit of the Ukrainians to defend their country. They've miscalculated the unity within NATO, to confront them on this matter. They've miscalculated, because all the billions they are spending on this war, they will have spent on, improving the lives of ordinary Russians. But here we are, the money is being spent on war.
Well, NATO has also decided to increase troops present in the Baltics. That's from about 40,000 now to 300,000, with the command headquarters in Poland. Shouldn't this scare Russia?
Definitely, it will get Russia worried, because as anybody watching this and listening to the rhetorics from the Russian president, this is a man that is unstable from all sense of it. And he's made it very clear that, where they have no problem with Finland and they have no problem with Sweden before, but if their country is being used as a base, for NATO, to have troops on the ground, or boots on the ground, then definitely Russia will match that threat with its own. And the question then is, when will this issue end? When will this conflict end? Because prior to this, and it's important for your viewers to understand that 5, 6, 7 years ago, even the UK, France, and other countries were talking about the next phase of warfare, which is cybercrime. But most of them have moved away from talking about cybercrime now. UK was reducing the number of, tanks, the number of, hardcore
military materials that they had in the past. But now we're now doubling down and we're saying that we're going to increase our budget to 2.7. That's a significant increase. We're looking at billions of pounds that will be increased. Now, that would not have happened if not because of what has happened in Ukraine. So you could see that the incident, the Ukraine-Russia conflict now have changed the world dynamic or conflict dynamic across the globe. And even countries far away like Africa is even suffering, and people, in far places like Ogbomoso in Ogun State and other places are suffering because bread is becoming expensive, petrol is becoming expensive, everything is becoming expensive. So the consequences of this war is affecting everybody across the globe.
Well, Russia, like you've mentioned, Mr. Olodo, Russia itself had previously said it had no problems with Finland and Sweden, but that it will respond massively to, any threats from both countries under NATO's umbrella. Well, isn't this a recipe for a wider conflict?
There's no doubt there is a recipe for wider conflict. And it's important also to understand the geopolitical politics that is happening in most of this country. We have an unstable political climate in France. We have a situation where my own prime minister in the UK we don't know how long it's got to stay. We've got a low polling rate for the US president. Even Germany has problems. So some of these people, the Russian president might outlive them because he's living in a country where there's nobody really challenging his authority. And if all these people are removed, the question then is, will the opposition parties or whoever comes into power in any of these European countries still have the appetite to assist Ukraine in this their confrontation with Russia? Whichever way you look at it, whichever training and whichever support the West gives to Russia, to Ukraine. Ukraine is the battleground. It's Ukraine that is being destroyed, and it will take it will take many months, lots of investment to get Ukraine back to where it was post February 24 when this incident broke out.
Well, Russia has made gains in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass region, but they suffered a setback, by losing Snake Island, which they said they retreated as a gesture of goodwill. Ukraine also is in a similar situation with more losses, though. Well, do you see any incentive for either side to, even look at a peace process to bring this to an end?
There is talk within the security cycle that, as we speak, Russia has made a lot of money from, from fuel and, the gas and everything, even going up to $1 billion, but all this is gradually being affected because the world, the West is looking at ways in which they could curtail the power of Russia. And how are they doing that? They're looking at affecting their gold, affecting their economy. We know as of some few days ago that even, South Africa, Russia and the others are looking at creating their own IMF. So whichever way you look at it, the world is going to suffer from this. But even when you bring in negotiation towards the summer, which is where many analysts are assuming that there might be, will Ukraine actually have faith in that process? Because they've seen a lot of turn back, a lot of talk from Crimea. Not from Crimea, from Russia, literally, and yet, there seem to be a drawback from it. You can't actually trust what the Russians are doing. They will say they are not here, and tomorrow they are there. They say they are not doing this, and tomorrow they are doing this. They are hitting, areas where civilians are, in the 21st century when there are precise missiles. Is it the purpose to destroy Ukraine? Because we know that Russia has come out to say what they want is not just about Nazis, it's about territory. So there is a serious issue here. Negotiation would have been the best option, and we know that certain countries like France and even Germany has mooted the idea. But the issue is at whose stake? Who is going to be the one that will suffer at the result of the negotiation, or who will gain from it? And I think that is the question that many will be asking, and many that are watching us at this present time.
All right then, security analyst Temitope Olodo, thank you so much for your analysis on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, not everyone feels the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, has been effective on the continent. Or some experts say in light of recent global events, NATO should be dismantled.
NATO members have been meeting for almost 48 hours in Spain amid mounting criticisms of the alliance's aggressive security policy and lingering conflicts among its members. Not even Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg's press conference on Wednesday, saying leaders had decided to transform and strengthen the alliance as a pivotal time for their security, did anything to allay negative feelings towards the alliance. Right in Madrid, where the summit held, demonstrators called for peace in protest against the summit. Some local residents expressed belief that NATO's expansion will never bring peace to the world and called for the dismantling of the US-led organization. Some scholars in Spain also believe that NATO is not necessary and the member countries should depend on themselves on national defense.
NATO should disappear, since the United States will one day admit that Europe is not the client state. The NATO members should undertake responsibility for national security defense in accordance with their own interests. For example, there is no conflict between Spain and Russia, so the Russia-Ukraine conflict should not have had impact on Spain. But the only role NATO has played is creating conflict.
Founder of the French Center for Intelligence Studies, Eric Denis, says he believes NATO as a tool to the United States to control Europe should have already been dismantled.
Since the disintegration of the Soviet Union and the end of the Warsaw Pact, dismantling NATO should have been the right thing for us. NATO is a tool used by the United States to control Europe and the world. If it had been dismantled, there would have been no NATO expansion and the Russian-Ukraine conflict. This is very important since the provocations of the West, especially the United States, and the expansion of NATO have forced Russia to take action.
Many also believe that NATO's expansion east of Europe is the root cause of the Russia-Ukraine crisis.
So NATO has always been an imperialist aggression organization, and now in Ukraine they planned this for many years.
The movement east of NATO is clearly not defensive, it's clearly aggressive, placing these missile systems along the Russian border from Poland down through Romania. So the Russians said, you can't do this. Their power is weakening, and for all sorts of reasons we know, but that makes them desperate, so they're trying to keep their position somehow, but it means more war, I think.
In the meantime, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says that he will urge fellow allies to consider a bigger role for the alliance in North Africa and the Sahel, and that intervention in Mali should not be ruled out. Western powers are concerned about a spike in violence in Mali, where the country's ruling militia junta, backed by Russian private military contractor Wagner Group, is battling an Islamist insurgency that spills into neighboring countries in the African region known as the Sahel.
Ukraine has received a 446.8 million euro loan from the World Bank, with 424.6 million euros of it guaranteed by the United Kingdom. Well, according to Ukraine's finance ministry. Still to come on the program. It's a relief for Ukraine, a charity match that is athletes have come together for an exhibition match for humanitarian relief efforts. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Well, Russia is ready to fulfill Indonesia's demand for fertilizers, and that's coming from President Vladimir Putin, who told reporters after meeting with Indonesian President Joko Widodo in Moscow. Putin says requests from farmers in Indonesia and other, quote, friendly countries would be met in full by Russian providers. The Russian president also said that Russia intends to honor its contractual obligations regarding supplies of energy, food and fertilizers abroad. Mr. Putin earlier had denied that Moscow was blocking Ukrainian grain exports and questioned the impact of missing Ukrainian agricultural goods on the world food market. Well, Russia's energy giant Gazprom yesterday lost more than a quarter of its market value after the state-owned company decided not to pay out dividends. For more on this, I have joining me in the studio our business correspondent, Ini John Mecca. Hello, Ini. Good morning to you. Well, with this happening to Gazprom, is this a sign that the sanctions are biting?
Well, I guess this is expected because, you know, Gazprom used to have an arm called Gazprom Germania. That part used to be controlled by Germany because they're very well intertwined because Germany gets about 40%, if not more, of their gas from Russia. So, but in the midst of all of this, Russia were the ones who said they're letting go of that part. So Gazprom is no longer as strong or as big as it used to be. So I guess, yeah, all of the adjustment is what they need. But investors are saying, well, they don't mind that they're asking Gazprom to replow the money into the company to try to get infrastructure, maybe to try to expand it without this other part. But we do know that supplies has been hit in Russia because, of course, I think Germany is not taking as much as they used to. A lot of the European countries are not taking as much gas as they used to. So that their revenue is going down, even though when we look at this in the face of the ruble is still doing that. Their currency is still doing very, very well. So you really may not be able to understand what they are doing, but whatever the Russians are doing, perhaps they should keep doing it. But economists are saying that it may not be sustained for a long time because the reality is that they're not getting as much revenue as they used to. Now their gold is being hit. You know, corporates have left the country. Russian government, they have to start looking for ways. They have a special fund to take care of the people who have been left unemployed, you know, from all of that. So the economy cannot be the same. And I guess that is just one of the signs that we're seeing with Gazprom.
Well, you're saying investors are saying, you know, they don't mind, but doesn't this have a negative impact on them?
It does, but if they are Russians, then they're, I mean, do you understand? They're going to be patriotic, and then they're going to say, we stand by you, because as we know, we don't really know exactly the news or the picture. After all, Russia calls it a special military operation and not war. So, I mean, if you're told that you should stand by your country and what you have to do is to be patient, it's not like your investment is going to be liquefied. You're not going to get it anymore. It's just for a short while, and then the company would, you know, recoup, and then you will have your interest. Then you might just be like, okay, it's fine. Because if what they're selling to the investors is that they are reinvesting it to get more infrastructure and expand the company, perhaps to cover up for some of the parts that Gazprom Germania has, you know, has been removed, then you'll be okay. I mean, he's saving for tomorrow, you know.
All right. Well, you know, Ukraine has now taken over Snake Island after Russia exited, saying it's a gesture of goodwill. The EU and Ukraine have also signed an agreement to liberalize road freight transportation. So do they still have grain?
Yeah, because, I mean, we talk about the issue of, quote, stolen grain. So, I mean, they even had this before. I mean, the Snake Island was just yesterday evening. It was the day before they talked about the transportation for drivers, so they don't need the licenses and the bureaucracy and getting this. So anybody who has perhaps something like a normal driver's license in Ukraine can actually move stuff. But as you asked, is the grain still there? Because a lot of them are either missing, burnt in all of the missiles and the strikes. But I guess this just gives some hope to the farmers. At least they know if you're able to survive and create or plant some things and preserve it, then the Black Sea is there. But you know, this the Snake Island is the route for the Black Sea. That's on water, that's cargo. But this ones are talking about transport. So the bigger picture actually is that perhaps this will go and because the issue of the threat to food security is there because of this.
Yes.
So if we have this now, and perhaps we have some grains that is still left and can be pushed out there, then it will help the world, not just Ukraine. Ukraine does need the revenue, but it will also help the world and maybe calm nerves a bit, because the threat of recession is really, really getting close because of hiking the price of power, energy, and food. So if this goes out there, then it might help.
Well, finally, in France, there's the consumer price inflation that stood at 5.8% in June. That's up from about 5.2% in May. How much of this, is connected?
Yeah, the whole world is connected. Even though France gets about 17% of gas from Russia, but their energy price is still high. In fact, 3 of their major energy firms have come out to say that I think they have just about 50% left of gas. Their situation is really good when it comes to energy because they have very decentralized, they have a lot of alternatives. So they have nuclear, they have solar, they have wind. The major one is nuclear, but they also still have gas, need for gas, which they get from Russia. And if you remove the 17% they get from Russia, that means there'll be less energy, and that means there'll be hike in energy prices, which of course feeds into inflation, a consumer price, which is what we see there.
Well, this war is affecting everyone.
Everybody. I think even in the villages you would feel.
Yeah, my security analyst earlier mentioned Ogbomosho State. I mean, the fuel, the foods. But we do hope it comes to an end.
We do hope.
Soon.
Let's hope that the Snake Island gesture would also expand to other parts, and then we'll have peace.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ini John Mecca, our business correspondent.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, like Ini had alluded earlier, Western fashion brands are conspicuously absent at a new shopping center in the outskirts of Moscow, but customers say they scarcely miss them. Following Moscow's decision to send thousands of troops into Ukraine in February, international fashion brands from Adidas to Zara have paused their operations in Russia, while Nike is one of the handful to commit to a definitive exit from the Russian market. There are a few overt signs in the Russian capital that the mood needs lifting. Buskers sing and play, restaurant terraces spill onto the pavement, and as temperatures topped 30 degrees Celsius, people in Moscow cooled off in a fountain near the Kremlin. But on the capital's most popular shopping streets, the closed stores of luxury Western brands stand out. The TSUM department store, owned by Russian luxury goods group Mercury, is one of the last places Russians can get a hold of authentic luxury items from international companies. While Chanel's Russian shops are closed, the brand has an outlet inside TSUM where a handful of watches are on display, although a member of staff said those were the last ones left. To sports stories now, Poland's Iga Swiatek, compatriot Agnieszka Radwanska, and Ukrainian Elena Svitolina have all come together for an exhibition match set to be played in Krakow on July the 23rd to support humanitarian relief efforts in Ukraine. Former Ukraine and AC Milan footballer Andrei Shevchenko is also among the special guests who will attend the event, while Svitolina will serve as a chair umpire. The entire proceeds will be donated to support children affected by the war, with Svitolina's charity foundation, UNICEF Poland, and United 24 all set to be involved. And that's it on the program today and for the week. Thank you so much for always being a part of it. I'm Layo Olarinde. Have a great weekend.